I think that most of the day, the ones that have been attending to the panels, to the conversations and everything, have seen that many of the things that many of the concerns that have been raised are about everyone voting on everything. There's no specialization, and basically that it's a chaos. It's not an organized chaos. It's a chaos. It's an entropy within each DAO, and each DAO is a different universe. So what I wanted to bring is not a solution, but maybe a different approach on what we are seeing right now in the DAOs ecosystem, and the way we can leverage reputation. Reputation, as I'm going into that in few slides, but reputation as a thing to introduce in different governance systems, to create these different, to put it in Eugene words, like the fracture of the governance systems, or to split the governance systems in different layers to get more specialization. So let's start. And I know that there are like thousands, at least hundreds of talks about identity in Web3 and reputation and everything. So I'm going to quick recap on that, and then we're going into governance per se. So what do we understand as reputation, right? Reputation as a whole, not in Web3, not just in real life. And what we understand as reputation is, or our perceptions are, we're always talking about social experiences, right? So we're talking about perceptions, we're talking about signaling, we're talking about prestige, we're talking about status, and we're talking about opinions that we have, or that people have, or that institutions have about other people and other institutions or other group of people. So reputation, and at the end of the day, what we're talking about is trust, right? So the opinions, the signaling and everything that what I personally think about someone or institution, it's what builds trust around that person or that institution. And we can easily associate like having a good reputation with benefits, right? Like behaving well or having a good reputation will give you benefits. On the other hand, having a bad reputation will create different layers, different barriers for you to access benefits. So we could say that there are negative consequences for having a bad reputation. So there are clear incentives for building a good reputation. So we could also say that reputation is a matter of incentives. And we're going to go through different examples, and some of them are clearly monetary incentives, right? But there are other incentives in the governances that we should explore. So let's, again, quick recap on what's identity and track record in real life. And the basic logic in real life is that we have names. I mean, my name is Federico, and attributes that are, let's say, linked to my name, such as my background, my education, and everything, are linked to that name. But we could say also that my identity is not the same as my track record. It's different from my track record. So some examples of what happens with identity and reputation stuff in the real life, in real world, is that, for example, we have ID cards, social security numbers, driver licenses, credit score, diplomas and other certifications, our resume or our LinkedIn. And most of them are issued by states, by universities, by banks, international organizations, even ourselves try to build our own reputation by, for example, our resume. So for Web3, it's kind of different what we have to say, right? The underlying reasoning, the underlying logic is that we have an address that could be linked to a domain, to an ENS, for example, and the actions and attributes are attached to that identity, right? So that's like the main difference that I will say we can find, that we could find between the in real life identity and track record and in Web3. So track record is a part of this identity in Web3. these attributes that I mentioned in Web3 identity came mainly from decentralized protocols, obviously from decentralized apps and contracts, obviously through on-chain and off-chain data. And that's something very important to take into account. Both on-chain and off-chain data are the ones that are going to give shape to that reputation, obviously depending on the mechanisms and the system per se. I have a very good example of this and what happens when you're challenging this idea of Web3 identity. So something that happened a couple of months ago when we were going through a restructuring in SEED is that we were handovering the addresses and ENS from some of our delegations to SEED Gov as a whole. And when I wanted to, when I asked one of the people that participated in SEED Gov to hand over the address and the keys, he literally told me, my whole life is contained within that address. And at that moment, it was like, what should I say to him? I mean, we were restructuring everything, all delegations were professionalizing, and we, as an organization, should have like the ownership of them. So it might be easy to think, okay, yeah, you were like asking him from his wallet, his NFTs, everything that built his reputation on chain. But at the same time, when I asked two other people to hand over their wallets, it was a different case. So this specifically happened with one person, but it kind of enlightened me, because for some people it's very important to build that reputation with its own wallet and ENS. So we have this digital identity, and we have this address, we have the ENS or whatever the domain we have, and we have these attachments to that digital identity. We have attestations, we have dynamic and static NFTs, such as badges. We have soulbound tokens that are basically unmutable NFTs. And we have credentials and certifications. We have the anonymity factor too. So we can remain anonymous in Web3, in crypto, but what's important here is that our actions, our peer-to-peer interactions and our contract interactions are public. And that's where we start to build our reputation, or at least to find different attestations for building our reputation. So we have, again, we talked about identity in real life. We talk about identity and track record in Web3. And we are talking about, again, we have, in real life, we have a name and it's easy to track who we are. But we have the anonymity factor in Web3. So how can we build trust with a person that we do not know, and the only information we have about them is their address or ENS? So that's where reputation in Web3 plays an important role. I like this definition about like reputation system is in Web3, and it's that reputation systems are proxies, because for social relationships in Web3, we do not know the people. So those close connections that we have in real life are not present in Web3. So we're talking about trust. We're talking about how to build trust, how to build, how to have a proxy for identifying who are we talking about, who are we interacting about, or who are we going to hire. We're talking about, again, suitability. We're talking about power distribution. We're talking about alignment. We're talking about incentivizing participation. When we have reputation as a factor in Web3, we're not talking only about the identity of someone and its track record, but a lot of more variables that could give shape to different social mechanisms. So to build a reputation, what is clear that we will need a traceable background. And what do we track and how we track it in Web3? On-chain activity, as I mentioned, token holdings. I mean, if a wallet holds a certain token, you can certify that that's right. Skill attestations, and there are a lot of tools being built around Optimism and Arbitrum for this. Off-chain contributions, something that I want to highlight again, that it's as important, as well as important as on-chain contributions, because here you will see later that you have like, Eugene and a lot of the other people was talking about compensating delegates and how to weight the contributions in the forums, or how to weight the contribution in a GitHub repo. So off-chain contributions are also a thing that should be taken into account. And obviously, external credentials. And we will see some examples. When you have like a POAP, many of you will know what POAP means. It's a protocol that basically helps to certify attendance to events or different places in real life. We have a Gitcoin passport, and the important thing about Gitcoin passport is that we can migrate Web2 integrations, Web2 credentials into Web3. So we could consider Gitcoin as an aggregator. We have Karma, for example, we have guys from Karma here, and it's a tool for measuring and for scoring delegates' participation within the different DAOs. We have Bright ID, another tool that it operates into the social layer to get vouchers and validations on your identity. We have Underdog Protocol that it's deployed on Solana, but it's like a comprehensive tool and like that where you can build, assign, and when you can build like complete reputation system and weighting the different contributions through NFTs and different ways of participating. We have Orange Protocol that works the same way as Underdog, but in Ethereum, and we have a Red3 that it's kind of like the same type of tool. So now we are going to deep dive, or maybe not deep dive, but we are going to talk just a little about how governance systems in DAOs work today, or at least identify 2 or 3 kinds of governance systems and how reputation can affect that. So, oh, what happened, sir? So the important thing is that at least how it should be done is that a BP structure, the distribution of power, the social layer of a DAO should be based on obviously the goals of the DAO, and should obviously take into account the life cycle of the DAO, of the protocol. And it sounds obvious, but it usually doesn't happen that way. It's usually, okay, we have to launch a governance, we have to launch a governance token because the investors are like, we are under pressure because we have a commitment with the investors. So it depends which system you take. It will obviously have its advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, again, linked to the DAO needs and the DAO objectives. So, as I mentioned, this is not like cherry picking, but kind of. We could say that we have today 3 types, or at least the biggest DAOs have these 3 types of governance. The first one is more linked to councils and committees technocracy. So you have bodies of people highly specialized that are going to manage basically the decision making, and the community, as we know it, probably won't have a say in the decision making. We have stake weight, the most pure mechanism, the most pure system that we all know. A lot of people has been challenging the pure stake weight system for a long time, even Vitalik. And we can say it's a plutocratic system, because the ones that have more stake are obviously the ones that are going to have a more heavy power in decision making. And we have a third type, again, this is theoretical, reputation and contribution based systems, which are more linked to meritocratic contributions. So something important to know about these 3 systems is that we should start thinking, and this is also something that a lot of the speakers have mentioned, is that decentralization and representativeness are not like good or bad. I mean, being more centralized or being less centralized or being more decentralized doesn't mean that you're good or that you're performing good, that you're going to achieve your goals. So we should consider this obviously as spectrums and as matrices, right? It's not like, okay, you're decentralized, so that's a success, or you're representing all the interests of the community, so that's going to drive success. That doesn't make sense. So for stake, and sorry for the bullet points, it's long to read, but Basically, the pros, theoretically speaking, for stake weight are that you have a heavy stake. If you are heavily invested in a protocol, you will have incentive for participating because obviously your stake will increase. The cons for this is obviously that many people that wants to join the governance won't have incentives because their stake is going to be low for having an important say in the decision-making process. There could be disproportionate amount of influence of these stakeholders, of these early investors. And obviously, this comes also with unequal representation. For reputation and contribution weight, we have some pros too. That is obviously linked to, okay, someone that might not have a great investment on a protocol, but has been doing a lot of contributions, again, in the social layer, in the forums, in the GitHub repo, in social media, could have a more important role within the decision making, not attached to the stake that they have. So it's kind of like that when you participate more, when you contribute more, you will have a say in the decision making. So the pros here are only also the civil mitigation, because token weight, again, if you remain full anon, you could split your wallet, your token holdings in a lot of wallets, and, well, a civil attack basically. And increases also predictability, because you're going to know exactly who are the people that are contributing and participating. Some cons are obviously the subjectiveness here, right? Determining who is a contributor or what's a good contribution, it implies a lot of subjective assessments. And obviously, when you're talking about investors, it happens that an investor maybe doesn't have the time or doesn't want to get involved doesn't want to get into the trenches of the governance. And so we are going to basically be discouraging investors from coming, because the time that they will have to invest isn't going to pay them as it pays the token weight system. So for hybrid systems, again, this is theoretical. Hybrid system allows a balance between stake and contributions, and could help also to adapt the system in a better way, because it's not going to be stagnant, meaning that the people that has the biggest stake wouldn't remain that way. I mean, will remain that way, but at the same time, you will have other participants, other contributors that will be part of the governance design and the governance process. And there are some cons, obviously, linked to the complex design of this kind of hybrid systems. It's not easy. Moreover, if you have already a DAO, a DAO governance system, to redesign the process, to get all the people on board for that, and obviously all the factors that you should consider for building a hybrid system are like thousands of things, thousands of investors, so it's not easy at all. And obviously, linked to that, we have that, and well, every system kind of leaves people outside, and I mean, that's not bad at all. It's something that happens. With stake weight, some people it's left behind, and with contribution weight, other people's left behind. But hybrid systems don't come to solve that. So defining the contributions that are going to be more weighted and everything isn't going to bring you like the adequate system per se. It's kind of complicated and messy to find a good in between. So now we're going to talk specifically about reputation in governance. Let's think about how these hybrid systems could work out. Sorry again for the list of bullet points, but what reputation could bring? What reputation systems could bring into governance designs, right? And we're going to go further later on the different stages of DAOs and how could then be influenced or changed by these reputation systems. But we could say that introducing reputation into governance could help to create a functional segmentation, and this thing that Eugene and a lot of the other speakers were mentioning about not everyone deciding on everything. Let's find the right specialists. Let's find the right people for designing on specific things. Let's find the right people for voting on matters that they do know about. So that also helps, like segregating these different groups, segmentating these different groups, helps to aggregate interests. So if you have, let's say, a group of people that are DeFi experts and you put them together, okay, their interests are probably going to go the same way, at least if you're thinking in terms of the same protocol. Obviously, what Eugene also mentioned and a lot of the other speakers mentioned, if you really have the right people deciding on the right matters, you will have the most equipped people making the informed choices. When I talk about adaptability and professionalization, I'm also talking about that you will have mechanisms, or a reputation system allows mechanisms for picking the right people and for like putting a higher barrier to entry for and gatekeeping certain governance layers. Well, then I talk about governance layers and how can you cluster these different different scopes for each DAO. Fairness, because you're going to be reflective, you're going to be representative on the right contributions, the right interests. And the other thing that reputation systems bring to the table is that they give you a wide margin for introducing the temporality and decay mechanisms. And that's also something very important in terms of stagnancy in different DAOs or status quo, because when you introduce, let's say, for example, an NFT that attestates your participation or a skill set that you have, but that remains there. It remains attached to your wallet, and you only attested one time that you know about a certain thing, and that's all. And you don't do anything about it. Well, if you manage to introduce some mechanisms, some decay mechanisms to that, you will be incentivizing these people that got those attestations or that got those NFTs or whatever you want to call them, to keep participating, to keep increasing their reputation, or to keep maintaining their reputation. And that's, for me, it's one of the most important things that to take into account with reputation, because a token holder could have a stake, have a, let's say, 1 million tokens of a specific protocol, 1 million BP, if it's one vote, one token, and he could stay that way, he could delegate it or not. That BP could be like an active, that BP could be delegated, but he has no incentives on doing anything, right? The only incentive that he has is like to sell when the token goes up, and that's all. Some examples of reputation, I won't say systems, but some experiments that are going, that are moving forward right now are, for example, the Optimism Citizen House and the Optimism Collective Feedback Commission. I don't know if any of you are familiarized with this, but the Citizen House from Optimism was basically a way that Optimism introduced to veto token house decisions. And those ones that hold a badge, in this case, an NFT, that's a badge, were ones that were early contributors that received retro PGF funding at the beginnings of Optimism, or that were participating in other ways through attestations. Collective Feedback Commission is a new body that Optimism introduced a couple of seasons ago, and also works with attestations. So the experiment that they are conducting right now is identifying people that actually contributed somehow in different verticals or different areas of the governance. And what they do is assign to those people roles within this commission that works together with the foundation to set the goals, the expectations, and the design of the governance for each season. And those two, again, are based on on-chain and off-chain attestations. The other example that we have is started Wolfpack League. It's not part of the governance yet. That's open, actually. But what they do is to they have like this like wolf cab, big wolf, whatever. They have like different levels of this Wolfpack League, and what they do is to assign you a level of contribution, and these contributions are not only through participating in the governance, but also participating in or like being present or having presence in social media, contributing to the GitHub repo, proposing stuff in the forums, giving feedback. So they have like a list of 10 things that they could attestate, and they assign you a specific level within this structure, and they compensate you based on that. And they keep you engaged for you to keep contributing, to keep increasing your level to get more incentives. We have delegate programs. We also talk about that like a lot. Here it's also a reputation mechanism, and here it's also linked 100% to compensations, at least in most of the DAOs. So we have scoring systems like Karma. And what they do is basically track on-chain participation and off-chain participation and assign you a scoring. And in the case of Arbitrum, that, well, from SEED Gov, we manage the delegate incentive program. We compensate delegates based on their contributions, based on their scoring with tools like this. And the last one that I also participated was the Decentraland badges, Decentraland DAO badges. And we never implemented anything related to governance layers. We were like about to experiment with that, but what we were doing was tracking on-chain and off-chain participation, and those attestations were badges. So for example, we had that Decentraland legislator badge that was assigned to people that proposed something in the governance and a proposal that succeeded. So our idea was that that group of people and other badge holders to have something similar to the citizen house in optimism. It never went that way, but that was the main idea. So to talk about your reputation system in governance, this is a nice chart that I found in a paper that I can share with you later. But you have like 4 different layers. At the higher level, you have obviously the reputation, what we talked about, what we define as reputation, and we have the governance system as a whole, right? So you have to match the reputation of a single wallet, of a group, or whatever, with the governance system. The governance system and the reputation are not just like an attestation and how to participate there. The ideal thing, obviously, is not only to have those attestations and to assign a badge or an NFT or whatever. It's obviously what do you want to achieve with that reputation system. It sounds obvious, but it's not that obvious. But because there are a lot of places where you basically assign NFTs with different attestations, but they are basically useless. You don't do anything. So it's important to define the objectives of assigning those NFTs or those soulbound tokens or that reputation to certain individuals. The other layer is about mechanisms. How you assign those budgets, how do you assign those attestations? And for that, what you need are the tools. So going back to 10 slides ago, we were talking about Rep3, Orange Protocol, well, all the tools that are already existing, and there's no standard, and that's maybe a problem, maybe a good thing, because they are competing, each one on its own universe. But it's very important once you have all the things to find the right tool for this, for assigning the badges or the NFTs, or for assigning that reputation component, and to match it with the governance system. So now we are going to talk about the implementation, because it sounds like beautiful. Okay, you will recognize people, you will give them a reputation, and they will have access to different layers. And you will gatekeep the governance, so the ones that know better about certain stuff will be the ones that will vote and discuss about that stuff. But where is this possible? Because as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, there are like hundreds, I know if thousands, but there are hundreds of papers, of talks about reputation, about attestations, about Web3 identity and everything. And actually, there are also, there's a lot of material about governance and reputation, but there's no implementation. You have like these 3 or 4 examples, maybe there are others, but there's no experimentation. So what are like the problems or the things why we're not experimenting with this? And I want also to bring, I don't know if any of you were in the talk that the guy from Aragon gave, and he talked about why are we not innovating in governance. And those are some of the reasons, right? Because for most of the DAOs that have already their governance and their token weight system, implementing a reputation system, it means that they have to change the game, that they have to change the distribution of voting power or of power dynamics within the same process that they want to change. It's changing the game within the game. The criteria for defining the reputation also brings another problem, because if you have a DAO and you want to build a reputation system, the ones that are going to vote that, the ones that are going to decide on that, are the same ones that have a substantial VP. So how you are going to pitch or convince those huge stakeholders to change the system, because they're going to definitely lose power. Another concern is gameability, because if you have a weak system, a reputation system, it's easy to get those badges, get those attestations, and to gain a lot of power without doing like huge contributions. Again, bringing the important stakeholders, they see it as a menace, right? They see it as a problem, like giving more power to people that are not heavily invested in a protocol, it can become a problem. We talked about the tool and the mechanisms, and the important thing here is that if you want a specific governance to evolve or to develop a reputation system, you will most likely to develop a new system. So you have all the tools that we mentioned. You can work on some integrations, but at the end of the day, you will have to put a lot of effort in development. High in cost and burnout. So it's not only about the monetary costs, but also about the discussions within the DAO, right? Imagine a discussion, I know if you guys are involved in Arbitrum about a reputation system. It will probably take like a year or two to find like something to say about it, and it will probably lead to anywhere. And a SEED can bring incentives alignment, because again, contributors that are heavily involved will gain more decision-making power. At the same time, it could bring misalignment because of the interests of the big stakeholders. So as we saw, there are like many implications and risks that obviously, taken from a rational choice perspective, are basically very complicated to implement. So basically, no one is willing to experiment with this because it's rational not to do it. The costs are high everywhere. Now, not only in economically, also in terms of burnout, in terms of discussion, in terms of alignment, in terms of tooling, in terms of development. So now it brings us to like the most important question: where or how could this be feasible, right? And the answer is that it could basically be feasible or potentially feasible in many DAOs at different stages. We could categorize them in, for example, DAOs close to launch, when they're still at their governance design stages. Basically, because it's easy to craft the social contract between the stakeholders and the early community members. There's obviously room for innovation, and start from scratch. Like a whole governance system is obviously it has obviously reduced friction. DAOs at early stages. This is also a good place to experiment and to try to implement, or at least to discuss governance systems. If you're already past the governance design stages, what you will have here is the possibility of identifying the early contributors, the early investors, and everything. So you will have a better picture of their interests, where they want to go, and also where you want to go. So you will get more representation for those stakeholders and contributors, and it will bring a reputation system at an early stage in a DAO. Could help to incentivize those early contributors, could help to attract newcomers, because if you build like the right reputation system and the right incentive system, people will come to your protocol. And also you will avoid proto-governance scalability. And when I talk about proto-governance scalability, it's going to this stage when DAO is close to launch. And there's a, how do you say this word? There's a asymmetry of information between the ones that were crafting this design and the ones that are coming later. So the ones that are crafting this design are going to be able to gain the reputation system probably at early stages. Another good example of how to introduce governance, reputation governance, are DAOs with gradual decentralization. And I want to put the example of Optimism here, because many of you will know that the scope of the Optimism DAO is like, let's say, not a little one, not a short one, but it's mainly focused on public goods and giving funds to projects. And everything that's related to the sequencer and changes to the upgrades to the smart contracts and everything, basically doesn't go through the DAO. So what gives you this possibility of still being centralized, let's say, and again, let's talk about centralization and decentralization as a spectrum, not as something bad or good, gives you the possibility of gradually increasing the scope, gradually changing the scope, and creating these different layers or different bodies of people that will be dedicated to specific areas of the decision making. What gives you this is suitability and membership. You will have, again, if you have a gradual decentralization, if you're already an ongoing DAO, you will have the time to identify the stakeholders, to identify the contributors, to start rewarding them, and that will give you the chance to start building a modular governance with a certain degree of gatekeeping for this decision making. The other way, and this is there's one more, is with ongoing rewards and incentive programs. So again, if you're a delegate and you're receiving rewards and you are going through a scoring system and you're probably going to get a compensation for that, why do not start formalizing those participations, not only with a compensation, not only with a scoring, but also with, again, what I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, NFTs, soulbound tokens, other kind of attestations that will give you and will give the participants a certain degree of reputation. The good thing about this is that you can assign those attestations, assign those NFTs, assign that reputation, and it's not the best way, but you can still have time for figuring out what you want to achieve with that reputation. But if you already have a rewards and incentive program, you kind of know what are the valuable contributions that you're compensating. So again, why not giving the extra mile and assigning them different mechanisms for recognizing them as reputable? And the last but not least is how can we do this? How we introduce a reputation system in an already established DAO. So I brought the optimism and the arbitrum example, but there are like a lot of DAOs that are kind of stagnant with their governances because of the pure stake weighted approach. So basically what you have there is a oligopoly, so groups of people or protocols or stakeholders that decide on everything on the DAO, that have the most voting power. And there's kind of status quo where everyone's, let's say, happy with that, and the protocol doesn't evolve. The governance doesn't evolve either. So how can we tackle that? Okay, if you have governance that is stagnant and the scope of the DAO is already wide, what you can do is start this fragmentation that Eugene has mentioned, like having these different layers, these different groups, and these different structures with different scopes. And you can do that, for example, introducing sub-DAOs. So if you have, let's say, a DAO with a wide scope that governs the protocol, governs the grants, and everything related to operations, and everyone's voting on everything, why should that impede you from start fracturing the governance and make those reputable people that are acknowledged and that have the right attestations to start deciding on specific topics? And the good thing about sub-DAOs is that they can be like they can be resorbed, right? They can be, you can have a rollback, and if that specific part of the scope that was part of the main DAO and the mechanisms that you assign to that sub-DAO aren't working, it can be resorbed. So there's like a low risk on doing that, and maybe not a low risk, but if you think in terms of already established DAO, it's not that a huge effort. You can just take one small part of the DAO and start experimenting with different mechanisms, and if it doesn't work, it can go back to the main DAO. So some final talks. Well, basically, the earlier you want to adopt or to set up a reputation system within a DAO, it's obviously the best, because you have, there's no information asymmetry. You are still like at design phases, so you know where you want to go and what contributions you think should be valuable for the protocol. The later, obviously, the most controlled should be the experiments. That's why I mentioned the sub-DAOs. Maybe it can take like other forms, right? No, not necessarily sub-DAOs. The other important thing that I mentioned is that attestations are already there. I mean, most of the people that contribute to protocols, that participate in forums, I'm talking again about on-chain and off-chain participation. They're already there. What you need to do is to list them, to assign a weight to them, and obviously to find the mechanism and the tools for doing it. But the attestations, the actions are already there. And what gives you that is the possibility of recognizing what is valuable for you and to start incentivizing those things that haven't been made or that no one is doing for creating reputation. This is a suggestion that I have, maybe, is that we have the token airdrops in DAO at early stages or DAOs at their design phases. Why not to accompany that with NFTs? So when you use a criteria for airdropping, you are basically recognizing a certain reputation to that people. That people obviously participated somehow at early stages, contributed to the GitHub repo, designed the product governance, whatever. You already have the criteria. Why not to accompany that token airdrop with an NFT? Because probably the token airdrop will happen, it will happen what always happen, right? People will dump it. I mean, they receive the airdrop, and that's not going to be used in governance. The amount of, I don't have like the specific numbers, but the percentage of the tokens that are used in governance after an airdrop are like really low. And most of the airdrop receivers dump it. They sell it when they see the price is going up. So the other important thing that I also mentioned a couple of times is that on-chain and off-chain actions, contributions are both important. So for some cases, and obviously it will depend on the scope of the DAO and the needs of the DAO, but for some DAOs, off-chain participation is more important than on-chain participation. For other DAOs, obviously on-chain participation will be more important. So trying to find a balance between both of them. And the four last thoughts that I had, obviously, it should like fall that way, right? You should set objectives of the reputation system. You should find the mechanisms for assigning that attestations, badges, whatever. And with that, you need the tools, the right tools. Decay mechanisms, something that I also mentioned, are, for me at least, are healthy and necessary for a fair governance, right? What I mentioned, right? It's not about having just a reputation system and assigning people different levels, but it's also about making it dynamic, right? When you have a pure token weight system, it will probably get stagnant because token holders will remain that way, and the actions that they could take about it, about the token, is sell it or buy it, or delegate it in some cases. If you have decay mechanisms with these dynamic NFTs, soulbound tokens, or whatever, what you will achieve are incentives for keeping that reputation going, for keeping that reputation up, for increasing that reputation. And that will fight the stagnancy that we find in many protocols and the status quo that we find in many protocols. When you want to plan a governance, when you want to introduce a reputation system, again, you should think about the layers. You should think about fracturing it. And the last thing that I also mentioned, this is the third time, is that decentralization and representativeness should be thought as spectrums. So think decentralization, think representation as spectrums, as different matrices, because the life cycle of a protocol, the life cycle of a DAO doesn't depend on how much centralized is in at a specific point. At the contrary, there might be moments of high centralization when the protocol is driving a lot of revenue, a lot of participation, and if it's fully decentralized, could be the opposite. So thinking about spectrums at the moment of the life cycle of the DAO. So I think that's all. Or is it not? Okay, that's all then. Yeah, I don't know if you have any questions. If not, we can like wrap it up. Yes.
Sorry, making you run. Thanks for the fascinating talk. Two questions. One was to your couple of slides ago when you talk about proto-governance. I don't know what you were meaning by that. And not the second, yeah, the proto-governance gamability question. And the second question is, what's your view on bad reputation? Like so far, you've been talking about like, you know, airdropping to incentivize good reputation and whatnot. But what about airdropping to mark, you know, this wallet, you know, these guys are not trustworthy and whatnot? What do you think about like disincentives in that sense?
Okay,
Thanks.
so good question. Really good question. The first one, proto-governance, is referred to, for example, what's happening with Morpho right now. They are starting to design their governance processes. The only ones that are involved are the ones that willingly are involved and designing and participating in the governance, and the token is immutable. I mean, the token wasn't launched yet, so investors and people that want to buy the token, they cannot do it. So a lot of DAOs take this approach about like approving the first proposals or governance designs without opening to like the whole world, without being fully decentralized. So that's like proto-governance. It's like the pre-design before giving everyone the possibility of accessing the token and voting and participating in the DAO. Exactly. And probably is compound by investors, by people that has been participating in the forum, but they don't have voting power or anything. It's just a small inner circle that are like giving shape to the first governance design. So what can happen there is that those people will have a lot of information that newcomers wouldn't have. And that's what gives them the possibility of gaming a governance system. And the other one was like about bad reputation. Well, that's something that when I used to work for Decentraland, we discussed a lot. And it was a very polemic thing because we wanted to do that. We wanted to airdrop for, let's say, bad grantees or people that didn't deliver, a way to recognize them, a way to say, hey, you didn't deliver, you shouldn't be able to access a new round of grants. It kind of works like a ban in some cases, for example, in Arbitrum. But yeah, if you ask me if I'm in favor of that, yeah, it depends. It depends. For grants, for example, if you did not perform, if you did not deliver, I think that there should be like a possibility of identifying those bad actors or people that did not perform. In other cases, I prefer like these decay mechanisms, right? For having that bad reputation, right? If you achieved a certain goal and you've been recognized for that, okay, well, you have to keep that reputation. It's not like, okay, you're not going to do anything else. That's going to decay and you have to keep it up. So for some specific cases, I believe it will be worth it to airdrop bad NFTs or whatever. For other cases, I prefer like the decay mechanisms. Exactly, exactly. So that's again why decay mechanism and the temporarily thing are very important in reputation systems. It's not about like now you have like the big token holders, the big investors managing the DAOs or deciding on what happens. You will be just creating another group of people that will remain there, and that's not the idea. The idea is to make it more dynamic. The idea is to break that status quo, and again, decay is the only mechanism, at least that comes to my mind right now, for avoiding that, let's say, not in a bad sense, but a political class, right? Like that it's the establishment of the DAOs. Let's put it in that terms. That's the only way to avoid establishment. And the establishment in the DAOs exists. We all know about that. There are like parties that collude together. There are parties that use quid pro quo across different DAOs and everything. But again, the mechanism for that could be decay. Other question?
Perfect. Yeah. Any other? One more question? Anyone? Comments?
I guess the question would be, when you were talking about the sub-DAOs, like where do you see the things that you should think about to decide between a committee or a sub-DAO, and where do you see the line in between those two ideas?
Well, that's a good question. What I think is that there's no like clear difference on what should be decided by a council or by a sub-DAO. The thing is that a sub-DAO with its own mechanisms could help with some specific, I mean, you can give people that's not elected through a council, you like remove the political thing, the political spice there. The sub-DAO will work as a way of identifying people that didn't participate in that political process for deciding on specific matters. So I think the main difference is that not maybe about 100% about efficiency, but because the DAO could elect the right people and it could be 100% efficient, but it will still be a political process. For the sub-DAO, if you conduct the right research, and if you identify the right data stations and the right skill set for being part of that sub-DAO, yeah, I mean, should be more easy to avoid, like, let's say, political processes. I think maybe the value or the main difference is there about the guys that or the persons that are going to be elected, not to be elected because of someone is supporting them with huge stake or voting power. It's more about the contribution. I think that's the main difference. So some examples, all these that I mentioned as sub-DAOs could be committees or councils, as you mentioned, funds allocation, treasury management, community, curators, protocol incentives, DeFi, infrastructure. Those could all be committees, those could all be councils, but why not, again, if you want to fracture the governance, if you want to create different clusters for people that specialize in different matters, why not use, not to avoid like the political process and to start recognizing the ones that actually know or that actually contributed to this. Just an example, and I'm going to round this and wrap up this. And I'm a huge fan of optimism governance system. But many times what happens in optimism governance is that an election is a popularity contest. And that's all. Maybe there's no specific knowledge, there's no specific skill set. The people just voted because they are popular in optimism, sometimes for specific cases. And that's what I propose to tackle with this kind of sub-DAO structure.